I think I just like genuinely love my job. Like I love where I'm teaching. I love this place. I love this community. I love my school, my colleagues, my kids.
On today's episode of the Deer Park Roundtable, we are joined by Allie Stiller, junior high math teacher, cross-country coach, and head of the Deer Park Education Association.
So I've always kind of had this like philosophy that I want my kids to, at the end of the day, like know that I just like genuinely care about them and who they are as a person.
Allie brings her passion for math and innovative teaching to everything she does. In this episode, we'll dive into Allie's journey as an educator and how she motivates her students in the classroom.
It's funny. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when somebody was like, I think you'd be great at this, Allie. I was like, why?
Allie, just like everyone we've interviewed at the Roundtable, is tremendously involved in the Deer Park community and someone whose passion really just jumps off the screen. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the park, where the stories of our incredible staff and faculty go beyond the classroom. From their passions to their personal journeys, we're diving into what makes our Deer Park community truly unique. This podcast isn't just about their roles as educators, it's about who they are as individuals, the lives they lead, and the impact they make both inside and outside of school walls. This is the Deer Park Roundtable. Allie Stiller, welcome to the Roundtable.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get this out of the way first.
Yeah.
You are a cross-country coach and a math teacher. Running and math, why do you enjoy the things that people hate so much?
That's a funny question, especially when you throw in there that it's middle school math. It's even better because people usually, when you say like, oh, I'm a middle school math teacher, they're like, you are crazy. And I'm like, I sure am. I am crazy. I started running really young. My dad loved to run. And so I learned a love of running at a really young age, like 6th grade. Yeah. And then I continued to do cross country in middle school and then into high school. Same with track, which was also funny because I was a sprinter in track, but I was the distance runner. So people would also get confused with like, what in the world? And math, I've always loved math because there's always an answer. Like there's nothing confused. Like, okay, there's stuff that's confusing about math for sure. But when you look at like science, I liked science because it was kind of math, the chemistry side of it, but like social studies, awful at it because it was all memorization. And I was like, this is hard. Like, I don't want to just memorize all these things and then forget about them.
There's something to being able to work through something and 100%. Use the tools that you have.
Correct.
And
there's like usually a definitive answer.
Not like, for me, but for you.
Correct. But like you can teach a concept and it's like, oh, great. Now go do this like time after time after time. And it makes sense. So that's why I love like, things people hate, running.
Running and math, those two things. I want to start with this. You went to the Ron Clark Academy this summer, correct?
I did not get to go. So I went to the event.
Yes, okay.
But then my husband planned a surprise trip and I didn't end up getting to go to it and I was so bummed.
But you did go to the event.
But I went to the event, yeah.
So just talk a little bit about that and like just kind of where you've headed with that. And I know the teachers have done a lot of kind of talking about it and what's been so nice about it.
Yeah, so Ron Clark and Huntington Bank came together and kind of put on this event for teachers around the greater Cincinnati region. Yeah. And that was back in, I think, April. Yeah. And it was just a night where they brought in Ron Clark. And if people don't know who Ron Clark is, he's this like super energetic teacher who was from like the burbs of New York. And he kind of just like really transformed the schools that he went into with their state test scores and like the relationships he built with kids. And he eventually built his own school, which is where some of our teachers got to go this summer. But the event was so cool. Like he just came in and brought this energy of like, why are we doing what we're doing? What are you bringing into your classroom? What are you teaching your kids? What are those relationships you're building? And the event was just like immaculate because I think as educators, sometimes we don't get to experience those things where it's like, we get to go to this really nice fancy dinner and get pampered. And so that was like the coolest thing. And I'm like, are we going to get to go again? Like, do we get to go like do that event again? And is Ron Clark going to invite people? Cause I would love to see what his school looks like. I follow him on Instagram and it's just like a different world from education, I think, which clearly works.
So that actually brings up a good point of like philosophy and like you mentioned at the beginning, like teaching 7th and 8th graders is hard in general. Teaching 7th and 8th graders math is even more difficult. What kind of philosophy do you take inside of your classroom that really brings out the best in your students and what are you shooting for?
Yeah, so I've always kind of had this like philosophy that I want my kids to, at the end of the day, like know that I just like genuinely care about them and who they are as a person. Like at the end of the day, like your state test score, like, yes, we want you to hit this score. But like at the end of the day, like I want you to know I genuinely care about you. And I kind of always try to create that very welcoming environment. If you step into my classroom, it's not a traditional classroom. It's very flexed seating. There's colors on the walls. It's not rows, it's tables. Kids are sitting on the floor. Some kids are laying. Like it's so not traditional because I want kids to feel comfortable in the space that they're learning in. And so I think when I break down that barrier initially from day one, they're more receptive to the math that I'm then going to be giving them. And so my math is also not traditional. Like we're not doing, guided notes and then go do, your 50 practice problems, 2 through 50 evens, because the odd answers are in the back of the book, probably how like you and I learned back in the day.
Right.
And so I think that also helps a lot. Like it's really easy to differentiate and scaffold for kids with how they learn best too. So my philosophy has always kind of been like, I just want kids to feel welcomed and loved and cared for. And then let's learn math, because if we don't break that barrier, they could care less about math, because who likes math? Again, who likes math? So
I want to jump back to your cross country, being a cross country coach. You were a basketball coach as well for a while. Talk about just like coaching, all middle school coaching, right? And a little bit of the high school with cross country, but mostly the middle school. Like what about coaching and teaching at the same time? Like, why does it all come together for you? Why do you enjoy it?
So teaching basketball. So I don't remember what year it was. I know one year was COVID because I had to wear a mask. But it was really cool because I was partially the 7th and 8th grade. So what was really cool was coaching the 7th graders, because then I knew them coming into 8th grade. And so building those like initial relationships. And we all know like in sports, you have to have self-discipline, but also you need to know how to get discipline kind of thing. And so I think teaching that at such a integral year was great, like teaching those 7th graders. And then when they got to come to me 8th grade, we already had that like foundation. But then also taking like, I think when you're a coach, kids look at you too, like in this more, not more respected, but when your player sees you also as their teacher, as their coach, I think they're like, oh, like I should probably, There's
a little more buy-in.
There's a little bit more buy-in, correct. And so I think that was really cool. Cross country has been awesome. I had this one high school girl who I had taught for 2 years, and I finally convinced her to run this year. And it was like the best thing ever. Like it was the greatest joy when she PR'd her last race of the season. I'm like running down, screaming at her to go. And she PR'd, and I literally think I had tears in my eyes because I was like, this is like what it's all about. Like, so I think there's a really cool like relationship building piece in the coaching, but also that like discipline piece of like showing up and respecting your coach and which transfers into the classroom a lot. You
also coach with several of the other junior high teachers. I feel like there's a bond in that group, that whole junior high group, that's maybe different, not better, but just different than some of the other kind of cohorts. Talk about your junior high group. And it's like the sweetest like friendship, I would call it. Like especially in our 8th grade world of, me, Ramacone Hills, Hubbard, and Miss Smith, like and even now Elaine Feldman, like it's not every day that you go into a job, or especially into a school, where you become like genuine friends with the people that you are working with. You're kind of just colleagues. But there's just like a special way with how we mold and just how we kind of just like share life together, like in our walls. And I think we recognize that we are here every single day and we genuinely enjoy being together. And so we can laugh with each other. And if we're having a bad day, like Ryan Hubbard will be the first person to call after like I'm having a rough day and be like, are you doing okay? And it's just like, it's so genuine. It's so sweet. We all belong to the same pool somehow. Like it's so in the summer we're still together. Like it's a really, really cool relationship to have with all of them. And again, it's not something I think you get anywhere you go to work. So that's been a really, really cool thing. One thing, kind of speaking of the uniqueness of Deer Park, one thing that is kind of interesting is that our 7th and 8th graders are in the same building as our high school students. How have you found that? You've been here for long enough now that how have you kind of the challenges of that, but also kind of the benefits of having everybody right there together in one building? Yeah, there's definitely its challenges. I think sometimes with like scheduling and, when there's high school events or like the ACT and, half like all the high schoolers don't have to come in and then the junior high do. And I think we kind of see that like we are very clearly 2 buildings. And we actually, when I first got here, we were on 2 different bell schedules, which was even crazier. I was like, we were like having Shannon Davison ring the little like ding, 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 like time to switch classes. And luckily now we're all on the same schedule. So there's obviously challenges, but I think it's, for me personally, I love that I see
every kid that I've taught until they graduate high school, unless they go to the Oaks. But even those kids are coming back. Yeah. And so when people ask me, like outside of Deer Park, like what's one of the best things? That is what I say. I say my kids at 8th grade, they don't have 8th grade graduation. They have 8th grade graduation. Right. They're not graduating to a new school. I'm like, you're going right down the hallway. Like some of you might have me the next year for math. And so that's one of the coolest things for me is being able to see kids and like see them grow up and see like kind of their success stories, especially kids that might struggle a little bit in those middle school years, trying to figure out like who they are, you know, and whatnot. And then see them like flourish in high school is so cool, because I know a lot of teachers that teach middle school don't see that unless they go to their graduation or the kids come back to visit them, which is few and far between. But me, I'm like, I have my junior still walking down the hallway every morning saying, "Hey, Miss Taylor." And so it's really, really cool. Like that piece of all being together.
So you and I actually started very similar time frames of each other. We've both been here for about 8 years, which is crazy to think about at this point. But young teachers a lot of times move on. You know, they're only here for a couple of years, and then they're. What is it about Deer Park that's so unique? That's kind of captured you and held on to you, and you know, why are you still here? And you know, I say that purely complimentary. Like, why? What about Deer Park keeps people around so much? Do you think?
I think it's truly like a top-down thing, and I think it encompasses also the community and the kids. I think Jay Phillips is an incredible superintendent. I think he leads really well. You know, it's sad that he's moving on, but like I think he has done a tremendous job of just like really investing himself in the classrooms with his teachers. The fact that we can call him and say like, "Hey, I have a question about this." That's like, I think incredible. You don't get that. I came from West Claremont and it was massive.
Right.
Like, I couldn't just call up my super and be like, "Hey, I have a question about this." And then I also think I think the smallness of it is so unique that it's not every day you come in and you're teaching 80 to 100 kids.
Yeah.
But there's just like this family feel about it. Like I have built relationships with families in this community that you know, their kids have graduated and I'm still in communication with them and like asking, "How are your kids doing?" And so it's just something about this like 2 square mile town that like, it is a special place that I don't, sometimes until you are in it, like you don't feel it. And so I think it starts at the top, but it goes out to the community. It goes out to our admin. I think, you know, I've had quite a few admin that have come through, but like our 2 right now are really great and like really, really supportive. I feel like I can do what I need to in my classroom and I'm not being like, "Oh, you can't do that. You have to follow this." Like they trust us to do our jobs. And I think that's also really, really important and special in a place, because some districts you don't have that freedom. And so
for sure,
the fact that we have that trust, I think is huge as well. And so I think it's just like, it's the whole thing. And you go out to the football games on Friday night, the whole community is there. Like our basketball games, the stands are filled. Like it's everything. You go to Parker's, like you don't get that everywhere. And so I think it's just a really, really special place. And until you're in it, sometimes you're like, what am I getting myself into?
Yeah.
But once you're in, you're like, yes, that's it.
You're also super active in the Ohio Council of Teachers of Mathematics, OCTM. Am I saying that right? Check my notes here. What about kind of that community has been so good for you? You know, I see you on social media talking about it a lot. You've won contests from them. You've presented at their conference. What about that community kind of has been so instrumental as you've been coming up here?
Yeah, I think Ann Berger's been really instrumental in that too. She's our math coach. And so she has really pushed for us to get involved and to get, you know, connected with other math teachers, which I think is important. But before last year, I was an island. I was a 1, meaning I was the only 8th grade math teacher. And so
a unique Deer Park problem.
A very unique, correct. You're like, you are an island and you are the only 8th grade teacher that they are going to get, kind of thing. And so being able to connect with other educators and, you know, I've talked to Reading teachers at these things, like, how do you handle this? Like, you are an island, or there's only 2 of you. How do you look at data? How do you know how to create an assessment? How do you know what to compare? Like, you have one measure here. Yep. And so being able to just be in a space with other educators has been really, really cool. I love presenting, which some people hate. But I love presenting to people about like things that work for me in my classroom, and then giving those like away, like, "Hey, now go take this strategy and try to implement it. And hopefully it works." Like, and then I also love learning that. Like, we just went to OCTM a couple weeks ago. There were a bunch of us math teachers from the high school in Amity. And it was just great to just to collaborate together, but to like sit in that space and to learn math and be like, "I've never thought of it like that." Because when you're an island, you're not thinking of all of these different ways. You're just like fixated on your kids, your data, because there's nothing else to really steer you away from that. So OCTM has been really cool. just in conversations with those, and the local one, the SWOCTM, which is just for our like area, which is really cool in May when you're like, I am tired and I need it to be summer. And you're like, it's like a rejuvenation piece of like, let's go to a conference for a day and learn some things that you can take back to your classroom, which I think is really helpful. Yeah.
You are also the DPEA president, correct?
Yes, I am.
The Education Association president. I think a lot of people don't fully understand, and you might see on the news about big time teachers unions, and I don't think that's what Deer Park truly is. But what does that role look like for you? How does that impact your just kind of work? Work in general. Yeah.
What does that
what does that look like?
So being our big old union president, it's funny. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when somebody was like, I think you'd be great at this, Allie. I was like, why? They're like, because you get along with admin. I was like, great, sure, I will. I'll step into the role. I have a hard time saying no. But no, I am very thankful being in Deer Park, especially with our union. I meet with other local presidents, and some of the things that I hear from just like other districts that are usually a little bit larger than ours, they're kind of crazy. And I'm like, I would not want this job if I were in your role. But it's basically, I'm kind of like the middle person when, if there's an issue or if there's, something happening in one of the buildings, I'm kind of that like space to go to Jay of just saying, and we walk through it. And so we meet, quarterly, and we kind of just talk through like what's going well, what can we improve on, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just, it's keeping that like really solid relationship that we have with our admin, and just being really transparent. Like, if I have to, like, I called Jay the other day to ask him a question, and it's so easy. And I'm very, very thankful in this district being it, because when you see on the news, like these teachers are striking, or like these, they're at the board meeting and it's like crazy. I'm like, you hopefully will never see that. Like, you know what I mean? Like in this place, because I think we keep such a solid rapport with just the admin and the board in general. And so,
So we went through just like 25 things that you do while you're here. I didn't mention Hope Squad, which you were at some point part of, correct?
I was part of Hope Squad. I stepped down from that,
And so when you put all of those together, when you do find time to not be in the park, what does life look like for Allie?
A life for me. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. I have my little son William. I have 2 little stepdaughters as well. So we're just like one big happy blended family. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, every weekend looks different for us. Every day kind of looks different for us. I love running. I ran a half marathon a couple weeks ago, which was great. I used to do CrossFit. I don't do CrossFit anymore. After William was born, I stepped down from that. But I used to love filling my time.
You taught CrossFit, right?
I used to coach CrossFit. Wow. I competed in Olympic weightlifting. I was pretty serious, but then I was like, my mom hat's gonna take over on this one. And so, I like to bake sometimes on the weekends. I'm not a cook. My husband's the cook. So it's just kind of, what are we doing? Are my parents coming in town? Are we going on a run this weekend? Are we, going to visit somebody? And so it's really just craziness all the time.
I hear you.
It's life.
You're also a Bearcat, right? University of Cincinnati.
Yep. Go Bearcats.
What about your time at UC kind of shaped your educational experience? Was teaching what you always wanted to do? Did you find it out then? What did your college kind of experience shape where you are now?
Yeah, so I actually did not start in education. Yeah. I started in sports med. I was like pre-PT. And I very quickly learned after a semester that I hated anatomy and physiology. And I was like, well, if I don't like this, I probably won't like operating on people, like stretching. Yeah. And so I vividly recall a conversation I had with one of my like best friends back in college. And she said, Allie, if you were to wake up every single day and like love what you were doing and find joy in it, what would it be? I said, teaching middle school math and coaching. And she's like, well, then why aren't you doing that? I was like, well, because change is really scary, and I've already like paid all this money to do these courses. And so I called my parents the next day and switched my major, and then went into education, and I graduated on time in 4 years. It was great. The education cohort at the time was great. I know it's kind of like shrinking just because I think education is not as desirable right now, which is unfortunate. But I had a great time. Like I had incredible professors. I'd made some awesome friends. I did really cool practicums. I was at Ethel M. Taylor, which is a CPS down towards the city. I did my student teaching at Pleasant Ridge Montessori, so right down the road. Yep. At that point, I still didn't know that Deer Park even existed on the map. I was like, what is this place? So it was great. Yeah, but no, I did not always want to be a teacher. Well, I did when I was a kid, playing with my imaginary kids, but
it's interesting that you say that though, because I think one thing that strikes me about you is that your passion for math kind of jumps off the page between social media, watching you in the classroom, those types of things. Like, what is it that you do? What's the secret sauce for you to like make math just like come alive for kids?
I think I just like genuinely love my job. Like I love where I'm teaching. I love this place. I love this community. I love my school, my colleagues, my kids. Like, I think that makes it so much easier to do my job. Are there hard days? Of course there's hard days. There's days where I'm like, why am I doing this for a living? Like, what teacher doesn't have those thoughts, right? But like, I love when I get excited about what I'm doing. And that's why I kind of like strategically plan my class to not just be like by the book. We're not just going to take notes and do this, because I'm not excited about that. So if I'm not excited, why would kids be? So like, I love creating activities like a card sort, a scavenger hunt. We're walking around the classroom. We're doing small groups. Like, we just change it up so often too, that I also like that. There's routine, but there's change. And I think that also helps. And so I'm just like not your like typical teacher, but like, I think it's so much of where I'm working.
Yeah.
Because when I was at West Claremont, I didn't have this like same like joy. I mean, I loved it was my first year of teaching, but like I loved it, but I didn't realize how much I loved it until I came into this district, which was crazy.
Yeah. One other thing that I think kind of all of these roles bring together for you is that you really focus on personal growth, professional growth, but not just of you, of other teachers, just like rising tide lifting all boats. Like, how do you stay motivated to keep learning, to keep, improving your craft as you go year through year?
I think I get bored if I do the same thing. Yeah. And it's so funny because, we have our like pacing guides and it's like, oh, we did this last year. I'm like, but I want to change it. I want to make it better. Like, I want to, recreate the wheel. And so I think I just always want to be like learning the next thing. Like, what tech tool are we now using? What self-checking thing are we using? 5 years ago, I didn't even know self-checking Excel sheets existed. And now I'm creating those for my kids and they love them because it's like immediate like feedback. And so I think finding like what also kids are going to find excitement I use loosely, but like find that they can do math in and it's accessible to them and they're not hating coming to class. So that helps, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, it's exhausting. I'm exhausted a lot of the time, but it's okay.
Well, Allie, thanks for doing this. I have one last kind of question for you, but this has been a blast. It's always great to do these and just get to sit and chat with teachers for a while and learn what they're doing. But I think the last thing where I want to close out today is just like at the end of a school year, what is kind of your hope for a student, for any student, all students, to walk away thinking, when they think back on Miss Stiller's classroom, math or otherwise?
Yeah, I want them to look back and say, I missed that class. Yeah. Like, I want them to be like, I want to go back to Miss Stiller's class. I can't necessarily always put my finger on what I'm doing because I will have kids occasionally, and this is not tooting my own horn, but I'll have kids come back and say, I want to come back in this classroom. I want you to teach me math. And I'm like, what did I do that was so different? And I truly don't know. Yeah. I think I just genuinely love kids. I love my job. I love math. I love teaching math. I love where I'm teaching. And so I think when I have those kids come back and say that, like, I'm like, I did something right. Whatever I did, like my internal heart of whatever came out that year, and I poured into these kids and I invested in these kids and they felt it. And sometimes it's crazy, the kids that'll come back and be like, and I'm like, oh, I guess I really made an impact on you and I didn't realize it. And those are really sweet victories. And so I want them, like, that's my hope always, is like, when that kid walks down the hallway their senior year, like, Miss Stiller, like, you taught me some math and I don't even remember slope intercept form or whatever. Great. But like, I missed that class. Yeah. Whatever it was, whatever that energy was in that space, that was memorable. And again, I can't put my finger on it, but but yeah, that's my biggest hope when kids leave my classroom.
All right. Well, thank you, Allie. Seriously, this was so much fun, and keep doing it. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. And thanks for doing this for me.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it.